And welcome back to Code to Serve Academy. Today we are going to continue to the last lecture that we were talking about, that is a revision of class 9 topic that we are studying in for the chapter number 1 of class 10. So in the last class we have already learned about the basic concept, what all are the basic part of any programming language, means any program that we write in Java. So we saw in the last lecture like what is comment, what is method, what is classes, and where we generally write our code. So in this lecture we'll move forward and we'll try to cover up more topic that we have already learned in class 9. Okay, so let's get started. So for the Java fundamental, basically we need to know like Java uses Unicode character. So what I mean by Unicode character, suppose whatever symbol we are writing, जो हम लोग कोई भी symbol लिख रहे हैं, that is suppose A, B or 0 or anything that is human readable form. तो जो हम लोग जो भी चीज लिख रहे हैं in the form that we can read or we can write in any language, either it be English, Arabic, Chinese, Japanese, or anything that can be encoded into a certain format, and that format we call it as a unique code. So you can think of like, suppose I'm giving you an example, /0000. So here you see this is the least value that is supported in Unicode, and the maximum value that is supported in Unicode is it's starting from 0, it goes till F, 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 F. Okay, so in this Unicode is basically is of 2 byte. So if you have already learned about the size of the data type, so what I say is Unicode is of 2 byte. What I mean by 2 byte? 2 byte is equivalent to 16 bit. Okay, so if I try to, 1 byte is of 8 bit. All right, so smallest unit in memory is generally a bit. So 1 bit is the smallest memory that is possible in computer. Okay, and if we combine 8 bit, 1 bit you can assume it as a 1 box, and if you combine similarly, suppose if you combine this type of 4 bit, so this forms 1 nibble. So this is second memory unit that we have. First is a bit, second is a nibble, third is your byte. Okay, so if I write here, first is a bit, then is your nibble, and third is your byte. Okay, so here one if I take talk about the bit, so 1 bit is equivalent to 1 box, you can assume for now. And similarly, if you combine this type of 4 boxes, it will form 1 nibble. Okay, and if you combine similarly 8 boxes, it will form byte. Okay, goes on, suppose total 8 boxes. All right, so what I mean about what we can think from this is like 2 byte is equivalent to 16 bit. So if we have to find the range, means how many character can be encoded using Unicode, we can find out by the formula like 2 to the power bit. So if we write 2 to the power bit, 2 to the power 16, it will approximately be it will almost be 65,536. Okay, so if you think about this number in universe, whatever character code we see, either it be C, either it be D, or either be it in pi, or any character till now you have encountered can be represented using this type of encoding. Got my point? This type of encoding. So this encoding is representing suppose 0, and this encoding might be supporting some other number, other values. We don't have to go much deeper into this topic, but you should have an idea. This is the least value and this is the highest value that Unicode can support. Okay, as you have already learned about the ASCII values, you are knowing about the ASCII values. Suppose if I will say capital A, then it is what is the ASCII value of capital A? 65. Okay, capital A is 65, and similarly if I talk about the ASCII value of small a, that tends to be 97. So generally we tried to encode in the ASCII form also, and also in the Unicode. So when we already had ASCII, then why we are going with Unicode? Generally, the range of ASCII is very less. Almost, if you think about 125 characters, so character set. So in universe, that much character is not enough to represent every whatever symbol you have or whatever stuff you have. You cannot represent it. Got my point? So that is why there is a use of Unicode, and similarly there are n number of encoding pattern used by different programming language. Suppose you are here learning about the Unicode that is of 2 byte. In other programming language or other stuff also supports 4 byte. So that depends like what type of programming language you are using and what type of encoding pattern we are using. So based on that, the number of character that is supported will vary based on the number of byte it support. Got it? So let's move forward, and you should remember like what Java uses. Java uses Unicode character set. Got it? Let's move forward. Next, we have to know what all are the parts that we are going to see in any program. Okay, so here first let us see about the tokens. So as you know, like the tokens is what? Any smallest, if I say tokens are the fundamental building blocks of the program. What I mean by this, whatever key that you see, like we already saw here, if I scroll back, okay, here. So already if we see over here, like we see n number of keywords or other words. So basically this smallest unit means the smallest unit forms keywords, like the predefined keywords will be coming out the keywords, but we are talking about the tokens. That is the smallest unit of a program is basically called a token. So what all can be a token? Let's see where we were here. Okay, so in the token you should probably learn about like this way. Let me show. KILOS. Okay, this is also S or P. All right. So K stands for keyword. Okay, K stands for keywords. Okay, so there are n number of keywords. Keywords are basically a predefined word. Predefined word, that means you cannot use that word that is already defined. So हम लोग वो सब word को use नहीं कर सकते हैं जो already defined है, like int or like class or like main. Got it? So these all are, there are n number of keywords. Okay, in any other programming language, if you talk about there in if you talk about Java, so these are the keywords, and there are n number of keywords. If you talk about any other programming language, C, C++, there is some different sets of keywords that is already defined. Okay, so first is the keyword that I already told you about. Second is the identifier. Identifier means the name we are assigning to any class or the variables or anything that we using which you can uniquely identify them. You can think of yourself like you are sitting in a class, you have some name. Okay, so you have some name so that others can uniquely identify you using your name. So that becomes your identifier. So there are some set of rules. So identifier, to declare an identifier, there is some set of rules. आइडेंटिफायर को नेम करने के लिए हम लोग के पास कुछ रूल्स है, वो अभी हम लोग आगे देखेंगे. ठीक है, उसके बाद देखते हैं लिटरल्स. Okay, so literals is like what I say, it can be an integer literals or boolean literals or like floating point literals or other literals or the null literals. Okay, so these all forms are literals, and O stand for operators. So what all are operators? Like you might be knowing, like plus, minus, increment, decrement, then right shift, left shift, right shift fill with zero. So these all are few operators that we have already covered, and we'll also learning about this in the next slides. Okay, so these all forms operator. Okay, next is the separator or the punctuators. So what I mean by the separators or punctuators, like separators, like suppose you give comma, you give semicolon after each line, so these all forms punctuators or separators. Okay, so now let's see one by one. Okay, like keyword that I told you is what? A special reserved word. Okay, that has some meaning, right? Like if I write here int, okay, so what will come in your mind? You will think like it is a data type. Got my point? What it is? It is a data type. All right. Next, let's move forward. Keywords used in Java, like for defining a class, or in the class that we use, class control keyword, if we see like if, else, for, while, do while, switch, break, and continue. You have already learned about this in class 9. Okay. So you might be knowing why we use this keyword, or why we use generally a particular type of keyword. Okay. Next, object-oriented programming keywords is like we use class. Okay, class is a keyword which is used to create a class. Like we already saw in the last lecture, like we created one simple program where we wrote class keyword. After that, we wrote the name of the class. Okay, उसमें अब हम लोग क्या देखे थे कि उसके आगे पब्लिक लगा हुआ रहता है, या तो प्राइवेट लगा रहता है, या तो प्रोटेक्टेड लगा हुआ रहता है. तो ये सब क्या थे, मैंने लास्ट क्लास में ही बताया था कि ये एक्सेस स्पेसिफायर है या एक्सेस मॉडिफायर है, जो कि वो बताता है कि इसको एक्सेस कौन कर सकता है, हु कैन एक्सेस दैट फंक्शन और दैट क्लास. सो यूजिंग दैट वी जनरली यूज द कीवर्ड लाइक पब्लिक, प्राइवेट और प्रोटेक्टेड. ओके, नेक्स्ट, or interface or abstract. These all are also object-oriented programming keywords. Okay. Next is the data type. So we'll be learning about the data types in the next slide. So you might be knowing about integer, double, float, long, short, byte, character, and boolean. So these all forms data type. So what is data type? In short, if I talk about, data type is basically a container. What I mean by data type? Data type is a type of container. So we have different types of container to store different types of values in it. Okay. Next, if we see other keywords like void. So void means what? Nothing. Nothing is being returned. As I already told you in the last class, like if we write public static void main. So in the program, how we write like public static void main. So already I told you in the last class, this is a main method, this is a function, and this is basically a void. So what we write here, we write the return type of the function. Here, first is the access specifier. Second is the static keyword. I already told you in the last lecture, if we have to keep many things common for different types of object, we declare it as a static. So variable can be static, method can be static. You should know, like we can create the variable also as a static, and we can also create a method as a static. Here, this is a main method. This is a function. So we can declare static for a function also, and a static for a variable also. Got my point? So here we see the third part is the void. So void means the return type. Whenever we execute this program, so there might be n number of lines written inside it. So when the program execution will stop, what this method is going to return back to the compiler. Okay, what it is going to return back. So here if we write void, that means it is going to return nothing. Got my point? So that is why we use void. Suppose if you write any function, like this way, suppose public int sqrt, suppose. So if you give some number, suppose int n, and for this n, suppose you have to return square of that number. That means you have to return the square form of that number. So generally what you will write, return n into n. Got my point? So what it will return when you will call this sqrt from this main body. Suppose if I am calling from here inside the main, if I call like SOPLN, if I write it over here, system.out.println. Okay, if I write over here and I call sqrt and over here I pass 4, okay, and I close it. So what will happen? This will call this function. This is going to call this function, and after execution of this function, this is going to return the square form of that number. That means 4 into 4, it is going to return back 16 over here, and what is going to print in the console? It is going to print 16. Got my point? So this is basically the return type. So what you want to return from a function, that depends on the return type. So if here you write void, that means you are not allowed to return anything. Okay, if you write number or anything like float or a boolean, if you write boolean, you have to either return true or you have to either return false from that function. So here what I have written int. That means definitely I have to return some integer variable, or else it will give error. Got my point? Suppose if I declare over here a double, then I have to return a floating point number. Even if you return integer, it will typecast itself to a double value. Suppose you return 4 from there, so generally it will return 4.0 from that type. Okay, you have already learned about the implicit typecasting and the explicit typecasting in class 9. Okay, so now come back. So everything is clear, like what is void, what is return. So return, what we write, whatever thing we want to return from any function, we write the return keyword, then we generally write what we want to return from that function. Got my point? So this is, I think it is pretty much clear to you all. Next is the package. Like when you will create packages, so anyone has doubt? Okay, how to calculate some of the left diagonals in a double? Okay, we'll come about this. This is a part of array that we are going to cover up in the upcoming lectures. It is not related to our lecture currently right now. So we'll be covering up in the lecture that we'll talk about in the arrays. So it is basically your second last chapter. Okay. So focus over here, like it is void, return, packages, and import static final. So we will we'll learn about this, the final also, like the final, what the final keyword means. Like the final, if we declare anything, suppose we declare 4.5 and we don't want the user to change that value, so we will declare final to it. We'll learn about this in the next slide. So extends as we already learned about the inheritance. Like inheritance, suppose there is a one class and suppose there is another class. If you want to inherit the property of one class into the another class, we generally use the extend keyword. Okay, so extend, implement, these are basically we use it for inheritance. Okay, then there is a enum. Enum is like if you want to declare some values, or if you want to keep some values in it, we declare enum. Okay, I think pretty much we covered almost all the keyword that you should generally know. Now let's move forward. Okay, so now comes the literals. Literals is what? Literals are the fixed values of a data. Like it can be a number, it can be a string, or it can be a character. All right, so fixed values, it can be a string, numbers, or characters, or any data type that will be covering up next. Okay, so here you can see an example, like this, it is a string value. String is what? Combination of characters. So how string is represented in Java? Using double quote. So in Java, when you write, like if you want to store your name, like suppose if you want to store your name, so this is the S is in capital, okay, this is capital. Then suppose I write over here name, then if you write Suppose your name. All right. So here is what? Here is combination of characters. Here you see that n number of characters are combined together to form a string. Got my point? So here we use double quote. If you learn any other programming language, like if I talk about the JavaScript, this you are learning in Java. So tomorrow you are not going to use like this string. You are going to use something like const or let, and you write a name like this. And in other programming language, there is not importance given to double quote and single quote. Either you can in JavaScript, if I talk about, you can write in single quote itself, or you can write in double quote. But this is strictly followed in Java. Like for string, you have to use double quote. You cannot use single quote in Java. Okay. So in other programming language, there is a privilege, like you can use single quote also for a string, or you can use a double quote for a string. That doesn't matter. But in Java, for character, like single character, you can use single quote. For single character, you can use single quote. So if you are using like this is a character. Character means a single character it can store. Even if you use double quote, this becomes a string. This is no more a character. This is a string with one character in it. Got my point? So if we move forward, so it can be a number, it can be a floating point number, it can be a string, it can be a character. So remember this. Don't remember this one. This is for JavaScript I was talking about. So remember this, like for string, we use double quote, and for character, we use char. So you should keep in mind, like almost all the data type is in small, starting with a small letter, all the data type except string. String will start with capital letter. Okay, you will also learn about the string buffer. String buffer is also starting with a string, and we concatenate with a buffer. You will learn about in the string chapter, that is the last chapter of your class 10 syllabus. Okay, next, move forward. Now let's talk about the literals. As you already came across, like what all the values can be. Like here you see about the integer literals. So what all are the possible values of integer literals? Integer literals can be represented either in an octal form. You have already learned in class 7 how to represent in a number in an octal form, how to represent a number in a binary form, how to represent in a number in a hexadecimal form. Okay, so we can represent it in an octal form. If you want to represent any number in an octal form, it always starts with a 0. So if we see any number starting with 0, if I write 01, so you should always know like it is a octal number. Got my point? And whatever is not starting with a 0, that is 10, if I write, that is a 10. So this becomes your decimal number. Got my point? Next is a hexadecimal. Okay, so hexadecimal start with 0, x, and then whatever you want to write. Okay, like f represent what? Like you might be knowing, like we are going to 1 to 9. Then for 10 it is represented as a, for 11 b, 12 c, 13 d, 14 e, and 15 as f. Got my point? So in octal, this in hexadecimal, so we can represent the number using octal also, using decimal also, using hexadecimal also. Got my point? Now, uh, now if we come about, the next one is a Boolean literal. So Boolean literals is what? Either it can be true or it can be false. Got my point? It can be true or it can be a false. No. So someone has commented like we have to give double quote for character also. No. If you give double quote for a character, so it is no more a character. Like if we give double quote for a character, this will become a string. This will be another. This will become a string data type. Okay. So if you write like char n is equals to double quote a, this is absolutely wrong. Okay, this is not supported. You have, for a character, you have to use single quote. So keep in mind. Okay. What we were talking about? the Boolean literals. So Boolean literals, that means two types of values is supported. Either it can be true or it can be false. Generally, if you talk about in any programming language, so zero is, if you talk about zero is treated as false, and apart from that, other numbers are treated as true. So zero is treated as false, and other numbers are treated as true. Okay, now we come about the string literals. You already I've already discussed about the string literals, like how we can declare it. Okay, next comes the floating point. Okay, so in floating point, any number that has any decimal representation in it, like suppose 0.036, so this is what a floating point number. So generally in Java we have two types of data type. Either we can use float or we can use double. Okay, so we'll learn about this, when to use float or when to use double, what is the size of this. Okay, next is the character literals. Let us here see an example in this, the floating part itself. Like if I say you to represent 0.036 in the exponent form, so how you can represent that? You can represent this as, you can, if you talk about this, let me have a look. Okay, so you can write it as 0.36 e to the power, like how many decimal you have shifted. Like if I talk about minus 1, if I talk about the minus 1, so what will happen? It will become 0.36. Okay, so this will become 0.36, and e to the power minus 1, e to the, it is not in power, it is like e minus 1. E minus 1 means it is 10 to the power, like 10 to the power minus 1. Got my point? E to the power, e minus 1 means 10 to the power minus 1. Either you can use capital E or either you can use small e, like you can use like 0.3 small 6 e minus 1. So both are correct. Okay, either you can use capital E or you can use small e, both are absolutely correct. Now let's move toward the character literals. So already we have learned, like in character literals, basically we use single quote. Okay, like if I talk about, if I write a, this is a string, means it is, sorry, it is a character representing a character. Okay, similarly if I write like slash t, so this is a escape sequence, so whatever thing like you want to write, in a escape sequence you give a forward slash and then you write t. This represents a tab space, right? You have a key in your keyboard, a tab. So whenever you press a tab, so this much space or 4 to 5 space it takes, so that this represent one tab space. Okay, next is a null literal. Okay, null literal is basically in Java, if we want to assign some value, like we don't want to assign any value, we want to declare it as a null, we generally use the keyword null. Okay, so this becomes a null keyword, null value. Okay, so almost all the literals we have covered over here. All right, okay, if someone has doubt you can comment also. 10 to the power the next number. Yeah, so basically e represents what? E is in the form of, like I told you, it shows the exponent form. It shows what? It shows the exponent form. Like in math, what we, how we write, suppose if we want to write 3.6 or any number, suppose we write 36 into 10 to the power 3. Suppose we write like this way in maths. So how we write it in any programming, in Java, we will write like 36e3. E basically here represent 10 to the power. Okay, so it can be negative value, it can be a positive value. Suppose if you take another example like 36 into 10 to the power minus 3, so how you are going to represent a negative number, negative power. Okay, so you can represent using 36e minus 3. Got my point? So you can also use capital E or you can use small e as well. Okay, now let's move forward. So you can write you can directly multiply it, and you have to write only one e. Only one e is allowed. Okay, so you cannot write multiple times. Okay, so if you want to write it, like you can write in a multiple form also, in the multiplication part also, like two number you can write in the multiplication part also, or itself you multiply it and write it in a single form as well. Okay, I will let you know. Okay, in the upcoming slides I will discuss more about the same. Okay, let's see over here. Identifiers. So let's move forward to the identifiers. So what is identifiers? As I already told you, identifiers are the name given to any, it can be a class, or it can be a variable, or it can be a method. Okay, like in the last slide I saw an example, I gave you an example like about the sqrt function. अभी हम लोग लास्ट स्लाइड में क्या देखा था, एसक्यूआरटी फंक्शन को देखा था. सो दिस इज व्हाट अ नेम गिवन टू अ मेथड. हम लोग क्या किए, ये मेथड का एक नेम, मतलब कि एक नाम दिए हैं. ठीक है, so generally this becomes also a identifiers. Or if we write int a is equals to 10, so this is what an identifier. So we are giving a name either to a variable, either to a class, either to a method, or these all forms what identifiers. Okay, so generally you should know, like whenever you write the any type of identifier, you should generally remember one thing, like either you can start with underscore, this is underscore, or you can start with dollar, or you can start with any character. Okay, dollar, this is underscore, or don't think as a dash or minus sign, this is underscore, dollar, or any character. Here you should remember, like you cannot start with number. So here you have to start, number is not allowed as a starting character. Okay, so suppose if you see over here the examples that are written, like what are the valid identifiers in Java. So you will see like here underscore is allowed. Okay, dollar is allowed, but if you will encounter like 9abc, this is invalid identifier. Got my point? So here are some list of identifier, but you should probably know this. So with underscore, dollar, or any character, we can start any identifier name, but with number we cannot start. But number is allowed at the after the first character. You can write after the first character, like here. Like here you see after underscore 9 is given, so you can use number there, that is allowed, digit there, that is allowed. Okay, now let's move forward. Constants. So as I already told you, like what are if you want to declare some value, like suppose 4.5, and you don't want user, suppose here you write a is equals to 4.5, and this is a double, suppose double type, a is equals to 4.5. now user can change, or you can change it to 5.5 later on in your program. You can change it to 5.5. But if you don't want it to be changed later on, that means if you want to keep it as a constant, suppose you write a pin code, so area of the pin code will not change. Suppose for a particular area where your school is located, you don't want the pin code to be changed by any other developer or by any of the user. So what you will declare? You will declare a final before the data type that you use, like final double, suppose is the pin code, and suppose you write 828403. Suppose this is a pin code that you write. Okay, so later on when user or any developer try to change it to suppose 828404, so that will give an error. Okay, during the compile time only it will give error. Okay, so when you compile the program, that time only it will give error. So you've already learned like what is compile time error, what is runtime error. So during the compile time only it will give the error. So you'll detect the error, like this value shouldn't be changed, but if I'm changing it, this is incorrect. So there and then you will remove that code. Okay, so here I've already written like the final double tax rate is 0.25. All right, so this value later on in the program you cannot change the value. This is a fixed value, so that becomes a constant. Like here we write using like this way. If I talk about any other programming language like JavaScript, we use like const keyword, const a is equals to 4. Now later on, if you write a is equals to 5, this will give error. So you should also know about how we write in other programming language. Here we write with the final. Other we have a different type of data type to declare it as a constant or anything. Okay. Now let's move forward. Next is the variables. So with the name, you can think of what variable is. What is variables? Variables, that means that it can change its value. Means if you are changing the value of any particular data type that you have, that means it becomes a variable. Like here you see the syntax, like type, then the name of the variable. Okay, so you write over here the type and then the name of the variable. Example, int, suppose a is equals to 10. So this way we declare what? A variable. Now if you want to declare another variable like a string variable or any double variable, you will write double b is equals to 10.5. Got my point? So this means what? Once you assign the value of a, you are allowed to change the value to any other thing later on in the program. So in case of constant, you are not allowed to change the value. But in case of variable, you are allowed. You can change the value what you have initialized with. Okay. Now moving next. Okay, so this is very important and you have to remember this. Okay, so data types. As I already told you, data type is what? Data type is type of a container. What you have to remember, data type is a type of container which can store different types of values based on the container that we are using. So what type of container we use? We can store different types of values in it with different types of container that we have. So in Java, basically there is two types of data type. One is primitive or intrinsic, and second one is non-primitive or reference data type. Okay, non-primitive or reference data type. So in primitive, what I mean by primitive is predefined, means whatever it comes installed with your Java. Okay, so whenever you install Java, you get some of the predefined data type. So those all data types comes under the primitive part. Primitive, you are not going to create, it is already created for you and you can directly use them in your program. So that basically forms an intrinsic or primitive data type. Got my point? So in primitive, it can be either a numeric or it can be a non-numeric. So primitive can be what? It can be a numeric or it can be a non-numeric. Okay, so in numeric, it can be integer or it can be a floating or it can be a character. So what I told you, like it can be integer, it can be a floating, it can be a character. Now in non-numeric, we have a boolean. So in boolean, what all values are possible? We already discussed, true or false. Remember one thing, like in Java, we write true as small, starting with a small t. But if you learn Python, there you will write capital, starting with a capital T. So based on the programming language that you learn, that syntax will change. All your logic will be same, but only the small syntax will change. Tomorrow when you will learn Python, this false you will be writing like this way. Got my point? But you have to focus for now this part. All right, now come back over here. In integer, we have different types of container. So what all containers are possible in integer? It can be a byte, short, int, long. Okay, so byte is of 1 byte. Okay, we already learned what is 1 byte. 1 byte means 8 bit. Okay, next is short. Short is of 2 byte. Okay, next is int. Int is of 4 byte and long is of 8 byte. It's not a bit, it's a byte. Okay, so remember over here, if you are asked what is the range, means what is the maximum value any data type can contain, you can easily find out using this formula. Let's see over here, then we'll come back over here. Like minus 2 to the power n minus 1 to 2 to the power n minus 1 plus 1. So basically, using this formula, you can find the range. You can find the range. Sorry, yeah, here is minus 1. Okay, so using this formula you can find the range of any data type. Like suppose we take an example of the first data type. We learned that the first data type was what? Byte. So if you are asked what is the maximum range byte container can store in it, okay, so how you will find? You will say 2 to the power n minus 1. Here n represents bit, not byte. So first you have to convert the byte into bit, and then you have to use this formula. Like here, if I talk about the byte, so here in byte, byte is of 1 byte. Okay, so 1 byte means 8 bit. 8 bits. Okay, you can write as bits. So 8 bits. So if we put over here 2 to the power 8 minus 1, that will be 7. 2 to the power 7 and minus 1. So this will come minus 128 to 128 minus 1, that will become 127. Got my point? So you see, like whenever you are required to store a value ranging to this number, suppose if I say you like what is your marks in mathematics, so your marks can vary either from 0 to 100. It can vary from 0 to 100. Either you got 0, either you got 100. Okay, so if I tell you like you have to store your marks of your mathematics marks or any subject marks, so what type of data type you can use? You can use byte, because the range of byte is from minus 128 to 127. That means you are allowed, like whatever value will come into this, it will fit into that container. You think of like this way. Suppose you want to store 1 liter of milk in any container, so you will take the size of a container as 1 liter. Suppose if you take the size of the container as a half liter, so half liter will be inside that and half liter will come out of that container. So if you are storing something in a small container, if you are storing a larger value, the complete value will not be stored in it. But if you are storing a smaller value in a bigger container, that is of we are just not using an optimal case. That means that is allowed. Value will be stored, but you are wasting the memory. Suppose you are required to store only half liter of milk and you take a container of a 10 liter. So only this much you are using, and remaining what you are doing? You are wasting. So to be a good developer or to be a good programmer, you must know what memory you are utilizing, what RAM or what ROM, or what is the efficiency of the code. So these all things if you keep in mind, like suppose if somebody want to store his marks, so someone will take long. So if you take long is of how many byte? That is of 8 byte. Got my point? So if you multiply it 8 into 8, that will come 64. So you think about, you are wasting a lot of memory by just declaring long. Got my point? So you should remember what type of data you require, how much data you want to fit into it. Based on that, take the decision and declare that type of data type. Got my point? Now, using this formula, you can calculate all the range of what we are discussing in this slide. Okay, come back over here. So what I told you, like the byte is of 1 byte, then comes the sort. Learn in this sequence. So in any, keep in mind, this is a tip. Like in programming language, whatever the memory unit will come, it will come in the power of 2 to the power n. Like if you talk about 2 to the power 0, 2 to the power 1, 2 to the power 2, 2 to the power 3, and so on. So always it will be in multiples of 2 itself. Okay. Okay. Can we use any variable like minus, forward slash, plus using the type? So this will give an error, because these are, I told you, like this punctuators, if you are using it directly, it will be allowed, but the thing is, like it depends based on the program to program that we write. Okay. Let's see over here what I told you, like it's a byte, it's a short, long, and int. Byte is of what? 1 byte. It is of 2 byte. It is of 4 byte, and it is of 8 byte. Similarly, this float is of 4 byte. Float is of 4 byte, and double is of 8 byte. Got my point? Next is character. Next is what? A character. And then we have booleans. Okay, boolean. So character and boolean, basically boolean is of also 1 byte, and character is of I will have to look into it, like what is the size of the character. I'm just not able to recall. Either it can be a 1 byte or it may be a 2 byte. Okay, I will let you know what is the size of character. Okay, all right, now let's move forward. Next we have the non-primitive. So non-primitive, we have class, arrays, and interface. As I told you about the non-primitive is basically the data type that we declare. Means based on our requirement, we can declare this type of either we can declare a class, we can declare an array, we can declare interface. Like today, you have learned like you are storing your math marks. Tomorrow, if I will say you have to store all the marks of all the subject that you have. So what you will do, you will create an integer variable, an integer array that you are going to learn in your second last chapter of your class 10, and you are going to store, like suppose you got 100, you got 10, you got 5, you got 4. So this is basically an array. If you are able to store multiple of datas in it, so that becomes what? An array. So we'll learn about this in the second last chapter. Okay, so a character is also of 1 byte. All right, so these all is not of use for now. Interface is also a keyword, like it is most probably used to declare the shape or the size or shape of the class or anything that we declare. You will learn about interface in higher studies, not for now. Got my point? I hope everything is clear till this point. So you must pretty much remember this, and you should know the type and the size and the range. You should keep in mind. Okay. So we'll cover the remaining topics in the upcoming lecture. Okay. Thank you. क्या डाउट है बताओ.